increased the number of people who may have transported themselves or been transported to hospital by friends and family members. So they're still they're still encouraging people to contact them if they have been a victim of this. But this has been very surprising for people in Saskatchewan. This is the type of thing we're used to reading about in large newspapers from larger cities like New York and Los Angeles.
3 men are being questioned by police over the death of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool. The 9-year-old was killed by a gunman as he chased his intended target into her home. Her mother was also injured. A 34-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. 2 others have been detained on suspicion of assisting an offender. A High Court challenge against the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda is being heard this morning. The first flight was due to leave in June after an agreement was signed in April, but the flight was grounded following a series of legal challenges. The move is designed to deter migrants from crossing the Channel, with the Home Office saying Rwanda is fundamentally safe and secure and has a track record of supporting asylum seekers. The RAC is saying that petrol drivers continue to get a raw deal at the pumps despite a record drop in the price of petrol last month. They say average forecourt prices dropped over 12 pence to 169.8 pence per litre at the end of August. Now, that's the largest monthly fall since records began. But the car company says current wholesale prices mean consumers should be paying around 161 pence per litre. Criminal barristers in England and Wales have started an indefinite strike, escalating their current dispute over pay. The Criminal Bar Association want a 25% rise in legal aid fees when they represent people who can't afford lawyers. The government's offered a 15% pay rise from the end of this month, but the lawyers say the cash won't be made effective immediately and it will only apply to new cases, not those already sitting in the backlog. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will make their first public appearance in the UK since returning for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. They're heading to Manchester today for the One Young World Summit. It's an event bringing together young leaders from more than 190 countries. Their security here is under scrutiny. The Duke's currently bringing legal action against the Home Office after a ruling that Harry couldn't pay for police protection for him and his family when they're in the UK. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Alastair.
Thanks, Rosie. And a crucial point, just to underline something Rosie said there. It's a busy morning and a busy afternoon. Stay with us here on GB News for Britain's new Prime Minister, and you will not miss a thing. I'm Alastair Stewart, live on your TV, radio and online. Today we're looking ahead to this afternoon's announcement of who the next leader of the Conservative Party will be, and by definition, our next Prime Minister. Here's how we're going to do it. First, I'm going to be joined in a moment by Lord Robert Hayward. Robert was a Tory backbencher himself, now a Tory peer, but most importantly, a pollster. How did it happen? What might happen next? And to see really whether the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, who snatches victory from former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, is going to happen, and if so, how did she do it? What will that cabinet look like as well? And does that matter in terms of bolstering tricky Conservative fortunes in the opinion polls? Will Sunak be in or out, or does it matter? Next, I'll be asking commentator James Melville how soon the new Prime Minister will be able to ease the cost of living pressures so many of you are feeling right now at the moment. Yesterday on television, she said by the end of the week, the small business sector say they want it even sooner. And the newspapers are awash with talk of freezing the energy cap. So lots to talk about with James. And finally, how will the devolved nations react to a new Prime Minister telling them what to do? The former First Minister of Northern Ireland and a very good friend of mine, fellow GB News presenter Dame Arlene Foster, will be joining me later on to give her predictions, her judgments, and you can bet a lot on this, her judgments. I'll have all of that and more coming up across the programme. And you can, of course, get in touch with your views, as usual, as I said, via gbviews@gbnews.uk or on social media. Well, the stage is set in a very familiar line of jerry-built terraced houses in Westminster for the culmination of one of the greatest political dramas in modern times, Downing Street. A hugely popular Prime Minister with an 80-seat majority toppled by his own side. And in just over 2 hours, his successor will be unveiled as the new leader of the Conservative Party, and tomorrow he or she will kiss hands with the Queen and become the United Kingdom's next Prime Minister. We will have all of the drama, the analysis, the plots and the plans, so do stay with us here on GB News for Britain's new Prime Minister. Now, the announcement will be made at 12:30 this afternoon, and that will be just a little way away from where our political correspondent Tom Harwood is right now, and that is in Downing Street. I talked about that line of gerrymandered built houses, which is what my old friend Alastair always used to describe them as. It is where the Prime Minister lives and works. It is where the Chancellor lives and works. It is where the Chief Whip lives and works. Behind you is the pounding heart of British democracy beyond Westminster and the Palace of Westminster.
Certainly, and as I've said many times on this channel, a lot of people don't quite get just how vast the complex is behind me. Not just number 10 and number 11, of course, but there is indeed a number 12 at the end of that road and a number 9 just next to it. That connects through to Whitehall, an expansive palace of hundreds of offices, many hundreds of people who work across the grand machinery of government. And it is all about to see an almighty upheaval, a big changeover, not just a new Prime Minister, but of course new cabinet ministers as well, new special advisors. Liz Truss is looking, it is reported, at clearing out the team that run the mechanics of number 10 as well, keeping very few of the people who currently work there in post and bringing in a new, potentially slimmed down number 10 operation. That is, of course, if Liz Truss wins the Conservative Party leadership at 12:30 today. Voting closed in this 8-week campaign at 5 p.m. on Friday. Those votes have been being totted up over the weekend, and it's very, very shortly now that we will be able to hear if, as expected, Liz Truss becomes Prime Minister, or if the polling establishment, all of these different independent companies across the United Kingdom, have got it very, very wrong.
Well, I'm going to ask Robert Hayward, who's sitting right next to me in a moment. You know him very well, former Tory MP himself and now a peer, how we got there on the numbers. But I've been dying. Can I just come back to Tom just for a brief moment? One final quick question, which I've been dying to ask you. What if something catastrophic happened tonight? After the new leader of the party has been declared, but Her Majesty is yet to kiss hands with that new leader, is Boris still in command right up until that happens tomorrow?
Yes, constitutionally, although Boris is not going to be leader of the Conservative Party after 12:30 today, he remains Prime Minister until the Queen has kissed the hand of... until the next person has kissed the hand of the Queen. It's very important to get that round. The deference in this situation is very, very important. The Queen, of course, sits at the top. The new Prime Minister travels to her. But yes, constitutionally, the person who is Prime Minister of this country is the person who the Queen believes carries the confidence of Parliament. Now, to break that down, it's very easy when Parliament has a big majority for one party. Clearly, the Conservatives have a big majority in Parliament right now, in the House of Commons at least, I should say. And that means that if the Conservative Party pick a new Prime Minister, the Queen can very easily say, well, this is... pick a new leader, I should say. The Queen can very easily say that this new leader of the Conservative Party carries the confidence of the House of Commons, and therefore the Queen can appoint that individual as Prime Minister. But clearly not Prime Minister until that individual has met with the Queen.
Well worth making clear there. Tom, stay in touch. We'll come back to you as and when we need to, but you give us a bell if anything is happening there as well, because it's live and breaking news here at GB News. Now, as I said, Lord Robert Hayward is a former Tory backbencher and one of the more astute pollsters in the game, because that's what he's really focused on in recent times. And I'm awarding himself a grin there, and he joins me live in the studio.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Lovely to see you. It's normally down the line. It's great to have you in the studio. How How did an 80-1 against outsider beat the odds-on favourite?
A series of circumstances. Rishi got into difficulties early this year with his tax problems and his wife's arrangements. That scuppered him for a period. Excuse me, he was on his way back, but I think he'd have preferred another 2 or 3 months before any leadership election so that he could re-establish himself. Equally, Liz Truss very cleverly came out with a financial package, which Rishi was saying, I'm the man in control, and suddenly he was confronted by a financial package which received a very positive response because there was perceived to be a need for action, a need for change.
It also speaks volumes to the other key thing, and you and I have talked about this in the past, and that is that the overwhelming support for Rishi Sunak initially came from the parliamentary party. The growing body of opinion that appears to have pushed it across the line for Liz is out in the country.
It is out in the country, and Con Home, as its polls throughout, although I'd question the way they do their polls, had always shown Liz Truss in the lead or pretty close to the lead. Rishi has an enormous amount of support, and it's why I think the polls have got it wrong in that I think they're overestimating her majority. I think she'll win. But if you talk to all the journalists and people from Conservative Central Office and the like, the hustings, the audiences at the hustings have been much more evenly divided, if not actually in favour of Rishi Sunak. So I just think the margin won't be as big as the polls are predicting.
Yeah, and as everybody always says in these matters, whether it's an election or whatever, is 50% plus one will do.
Absolutely.
But for her authority in the House and authority in the country, that margin does matter.
The margin matters, but her first actions, before she tackles the cost of living issues, will be to appoint a cabinet. And that cabinet must be her first step of reuniting the parliamentary party, particularly because you identified she's actually relatively weak in the parliamentary party.
Yes.
So it can't be all Truss's mates. And a lot of the discussions in the media have said, oh, it's going to be this supporter of hers in each of the different positions. I think that's improbable, and it would certainly be unwise.
She would be well advised, therefore, to look at the history of 1979 and one Margaret Thatcher, who certainly, with a fundamentally radical right-of-centre economic policy, had several wets, as she herself called them, in the cabinet. Is he one of us from the Hugo Young's brilliant book came a little bit later. But when they put a foot wrong, they were out.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely, whether it was Gilmore or St John Stevens, didn't give them more than 5 minutes. You have a chance to prove yourself and back me, get it wrong, and you're out.
And that
is she that brutal?
Very, very shrewd move that Margaret Thatcher made. I think Liz Truss has got to show herself to be wise enough to bring some in. I think it's unlikely that she will bring a lot in the way that Margaret Thatcher did, partly because actually some of the people who are tipped to be in Liz Truss's cabinet, I actually chaired their selections when they were first. Kwasi Kwarteng, I chaired his selection. Suella Braverman, I chaired her when she first lost a selection and then when she was actually selected in constituencies. It's an interesting process that a number of the cabinet ministers, I've seen them start their parliamentary career in terms of selections.
I think one of the fascinating things about Liz Truss as potential Prime Minister as well, and she's underlined it in conversation with me when I did the Manchester hustings and when we did the People's Forum as well, is over the national insurance change of heart. She underlines that she remained in cabinet and respected cabinet collective responsibility, pointing the big finger at the disloyalty of Saj and Rishi.
Yeah, there was a very clear message there. And a lot of the Tory members who have voted for her actually liked her for that line and that message. There was no question about that.
Can I ask you a final question, and take as long as you need for it, because it's very important to the people who are kind enough to be listening and watching our conversation, Bob. And that is, Labour at the moment are not only ahead in the polls, but it is now quite significantly ahead. And there are people like yourself and others who are professionals in the trade who say it's now big enough, if there were an election tomorrow, that they could command a majority in the House of Commons, not just a coalition with SNP, Lib Dems and the rest of them. How long is our honeymoon period, and how steep a slope is that for Liz Truss?
I think one should say, first of all, that the opinion polls have been all over the place in the last few weeks. Quite understandably, they were declining rapidly in Boris's last days.
Yeah.
The moment he went, the Tories came back up somewhat. Then the drift of July, August meant the Tories have gone back down again. There isn't going to be an election in the next few weeks. And therefore, my reaction to the question is don't worry about what the opinion polls say now. Liz Truss has got to get herself established. She's got to reunite the party and get an clear indication that she's governing the country, and that's not just individuals, but commerce, business, and the
Absolutely. And it therefore all hinges, finally, I'm always doing this now, penultimately, but now this one is finally, it all therefore hinges on that economic package, which even, I don't know if the director can see that at the moment, I'm just holding up the Times, but it's all over all of the broadsheet papers as well. Truss team holds talks on freezing energy bills. That wasn't on the agenda 48 hours ago.
No, it wasn't.
Absolutely radical change. But it all hinges on whatever the detail of that package is come Friday.
Which we don't know about.
No.
And the implications, unseen by most people, are what is the impact on the pound, the stock market and the like, because very large numbers of people's jobs, and I'm not talking here about the city, I'm talking manufacturing in the Midlands and the North, are dependent on the financial stability that her package generates.
And the small sector, as your fellow peeress, Ruby McGregor-Smith said on the programme a few days ago. Liam Halligan will be joining me later on, so I'll pick up where you've left off and dig into that. But, Bob, for the time being, real pleasure to see you, as always, and thanks for finding time for us. You keep in touch. Thank you very much indeed. Lord Robert Hayward, Bob Hayward there. This is, that was the live picture of number 10 Downing Street with someone with a backpack going in. I do not think that those were the votes. I think that is across in the QE2 Centre. If you know your London and your Westminster, it's that hideous, rather grey conference centre just across the road from the rather more beautiful Westminster Abbey and Palace of Westminster. But we'll be there later on with Darren McCaffrey and, as I say, Tom, who seemed to move out of the shot in Downing Street. Well, that person with the backpack moved in. We wanted to keep you up to date. We're going to take a break in a moment, but just before that, you've already answered my cry. George says, Truss will be useless unless she can control Whitehall. Well, Tom Harwood touched upon that. It's not just the leader who chops and changes, it's a whole army of people, including, as Bob Hayward just said, crucially, the cabinet. Patricia says, Boris was our best Prime Minister who had the worst of challenges, and the dark side, brackets BBC and Sky, Patricia said that, not me, I'm just reading out what's here, against him. Also those snipers in his own party like Steve Baker and Mark Harper. Bring back Boris, says Patricia. Be interesting to see how many abstentions there are in the choice between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak when we get that at 12:30. And finally, why don't people realise that Boris got that huge majority because he prioritised that we would get out of the EU, and we're only halfway out. We have not completely left the EU. Boris was a buffoon. Balance and all your views. After the break, we will be carrying on with our conversation. The number one issue on many voters' minds, the cost of living crisis. How soon will we find some relief from our new Prime Minister? That and more right after the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking unsettled with some heavy rain in places, but it will be feeling warm. Let's take a look at the details. The southwest of England will start the afternoon largely dry with some sunshine. However, a scattering of heavy showers will begin to develop with the possibility of some hail and thunder in places. South East England and East Anglia may also see a few showers, but they'll be more hit and miss, here with some hazy spells of sunshine for many. Showers may also affect southern parts of Wales, but further north should be largely dry with some good spells of sunshine. The Midlands should also be largely dry with a mix of cloud and sunshine. The odd shower can't be ruled out though, but in the sunshine it will be feeling warm. It'll be pretty similar across northern England with many areas dry, but a few showers will pop up, especially across Cumbria and Northumberland. Temperatures at lunchtime will be around the low 20s. The morning rain across Scotland will still be lying across the northern half of the country this lunchtime, but further south should be turning brighter with a few showers developing. The best of the dry and bright weather through, though, will be across Northern Ireland with very little cloud in the sky here. It'll be feeling rather warm with temperatures in the high teens. So heading towards the evening, we'll see further heavy showers developing, especially in the south. And that's how weather is shaping up for the rest of your Monday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello and welcome back. It's 26 minutes past 10. This is Britain's new Prime Minister with me, Alastair Stewart, here live on GB News TV and radio online all of this morning. For weeks, the polls have been suggesting that Liz Truss will come out on top. So to April, who just tweeted, I put £4 on the man to win. Have I lost my money? I think the answer is probably yes, April, but keep trying, you never know. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, is at an engineering firm in Thetford, within the constituency of Liz Truss up there in Norfolk. Paul, of course, everyone's been affected by the cost of living crisis, and I've no doubt at all that Thetford is no different. But most people are talking about their own individual circumstances rather than those out there who create the wealth, create the employment of this economy of ours.
Yeah, absolutely, Alastair. Yeah, morning. In fact, there are statistics out later this week that will reveal thousands of businesses will go bust, small and medium-sized businesses will go bust over the winter when their energy bills skyrocket. It's either that or they trim the wage bill, which of course pushes up unemployment. So we're at this engineering business in Thetford, in Liz Truss's constituency. Essentially, I'm no engineering expert, but these are the raw metals that go in from here. They take them and put them into machines like this, and at this engineering firm, they turn them into small metal parts for so many industries. Now, this is a business that employs 4 people, turns over about 300 grand a year. They've faced really big problems with their energy costs. We can speak now to Tom Fleet, who's the director for Burrows Engineering. Tom, thanks for speaking to us. First of all, how challenging is running a business like this at the moment?
Well, I'd say it's extremely challenging at the moment. It's the level of clear instability throughout industry, whether that be security of customers through the time. You know, they may be struggling through COVID and now the electricity crisis on top of that. The complete lack of stability is almost putting a halt on growth.
Yeah.
So where we'd like to be looking at buying these new machines, employing new staff, we just can't at the moment. And a lot of the concern is obviously remaining as we are throughout the coming months, because you know, from a security perspective, we just don't know where we're going to be with the electricity crisis and obviously the recession looming.
Well, these are big machines. Just give us an idea of the energy costs, how much they've gone up for you in the past, say, even in the past year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in truth, our electricity bill has risen by about £16,000 or £17,000 a year. Obviously, these machines, they're heavily dominant on electricity, and without it, they don't run. So, yeah, it's particularly important within manufacturing, I'd say.
So what have you done with those increased costs? Pass them on or absorb them yourself?
Well, the difficulty is, obviously, we're not able to pass them on most of the time. We do absorb them 90% of the time. A lot of that is we're constantly in competition with China. Yeah. So we tend to, if we was going to go down the route of pricing it in, it just wouldn't be viable. We'd outprice ourselves. It's an ongoing problem throughout industry, and particularly within manufacturing. We're one of the lucky ones because we secured our rates early. However, I've spoken to a lot of small businesses out there within my industry, and 3 out of the last 5 have considered closing because the energy bills are not sustainable.
Absolutely. And just finally, what's your message for Liz Truss if she does become Prime Minister later today? What do you need from her? She talks about growth.
Yeah.
She talks about reversing national insurance high, about maybe temporary freeze on VAT, but what would really help you?
Before growth comes stability. You know, it's okay talking about growth and pushing for growth, but ultimately, we need some stability. We need to know that if we're going to secure contracts for buildings, or we're going to secure finances on machines, that we're going to be able to repay them. And obviously, over the course of the last year, with the cost of inflation, the electricity, it's not a sensible move, because you just don't know where we're going to end up. Yeah. So my message to her would be, give us an answer. You know, don't come out and say we're going to wait until Tuesday to come out. Our lives depend on this. Staff work in these buildings. You know, if all these small businesses collapse, where do all these people go to get their income?
Yeah. Tom, thanks for speaking to us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Tom Fleet there, Director of Boroughs Engineering. Just to give you an idea, these parts here, this is for a renewable power station. These over here are for parts in the medical industry. If firms like this go under, there is a knock-on effect down the chain. So we're not just talking about people's lives, we're talking about running the country, and the message, whatever business you speak to, is we need clarity, we need detail, and we need certainty, at least for the next 12 months.
It's absolutely riveting. I'm most grateful, and through you, thanks to Tom as well and the team there at Boroughs Engineering. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has declared that if she wins, she will act on the cost of living crisis within a week of coming into office. And as Tom just said to Paul, I want to know what she's going to do, and I want to know it right now. With her likely to be our next Prime Minister, what changes can she realistically make within that timescale, and will it be enough? I am delighted to say that sitting next to me during that brilliant interview by Paul with Tom is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. First things first, because I've written down a whole range of questions I wanted to ask you about the pound and this, that, and the other.
Need more time.
But Tom from Boroughs Engineering, he employs 4 people, a turnover of 300,000 a year. He wants to invest in new machines. He wants to take on new staff. He can't at the moment. He's insecure. That sums up the UK economy in a nutshell right now.
This aspect of the energy crisis has been badly neglected across our political and media class. Here on GB News, we've championed small businesses. We've been talking for months and months about the fact that this energy crisis will hit firms worse because they have no energy price cap. Big firms, they can hedge, they can buy energy forward, they can negotiate with energy providers. Small firms, not just like that one in Thetford that we heard from, but particularly across those red wall seats in the Midlands and the North, you know, firms where the livelihoods of hundreds of families and thousands of people depend are going to go bust unless there is a serious package of measures helping those small firms. And it's not just engineering firms, it's laundrettes, it's pubs, it's restaurants. And this aspect of it has been barely touched upon in the debate because everybody, understandably, has been focused on the energy price cap for households. It's clear that Liz Truss is going to have to announce a very big energy package. It will be something along the lines of what the energy companies, the energy providers, not the people who get the oil and gas out the ground, the customer-facing energy providers have proposed, which is like a deficit tariff scheme where the government subsidises those companies to freeze the price cap where it currently is for households, despite the fact that wholesale prices are very, very volatile and elevated, not least because of ongoing war in Ukraine.
Yeah. 2 quick points. One is it's a team effort as well. So it won't only be Liz Truss if she's the Prime Minister, but allegedly Kwasi Kwarteng as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who used to be the business secretary, and that's
and who's been talking to the energy sector for
and Jacob
months and months and months.
as business secretary.
To some degree, yes. To some degree,
Is that a triumvirate that the city will be happy with, and that people like Tom at Burrows Engineering will be happy with?
Well, it depends what they come up with. The proof of the pudding will be in the eating. We know that financial markets have been eyeing the notion of Liz Truss as Prime Minister for a long time. We know that the pound has fallen ahead of that. The pound overnight, Alastair, hit its lowest level against the dollar since 1985. Let's just mark that. But that's not just because of Liz Truss to any degree at all. The dollar's getting strong. That's what happens when people foresee a global financial crisis. There's what we call in the financial markets a flight to quality, a safe haven, and people go to the dollar because it's seen to be the most stable currency, and a currency, of course, where interest rates are going up fast, so you get more return on your money if it's in dollars. But the headline is the pound is weak, and that will mean that our imports become more expensive, inflation goes up even more.
And that's not just you and me buying electronic goods, it's people like Tom buying the raw materials that he needs to manufacture those widgets that Paul was showing us.
And it's also the energy companies importing energy, which is generally priced in dollars.
Yeah.
And we are now an energy importer. When you and I were, you know, in the 70s, Alastair, I was a schoolboy, you were cutting your teeth as a reporter. We were an energy exporter all the way through the 80s and 90s. We're now an energy importer. So when the pound goes down, we import energy. That adds to inflation.
Liam, talk to you later on again, I hope. Thank you very much indeed for the time being. Liam Halligan there, our business and economics editor. After the break, Dame Arlene Foster will join me live to answer the question, how will the people of Northern Ireland react to a new Prime Minister? But before that, let's bring you right up to date with Rosie's news.
Thanks, Alastair. It's 10:36. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. And as you've been hearing, the country's new Prime Minister and the winner of the Conservative Party leadership contest will be announced at lunchtime today. After weeks of campaigning, Liz Truss, who's widely tipped to win the vote, and Rishi Sunak will learn who will be given the keys to number 10. The priority for the next Prime Minister will be the cost of living crisis. Ms Truss is reportedly considering a freeze on energy bills. Well, the new Prime Minister will formally be appointed by the Queen at Balmoral tomorrow. Here on GB News Today, we have full coverage of the contest here. Let's look to some international news now. And police in Canada are hunting for 2 men suspected of killing 10 people in a wave of stabbings in the province of Saskatchewan. The suspects, named as Damien and Miles Sanderson, are accused of launching attacks across 13 crime scenes. At least 15 other people were injured. Police say it appears some of the victims were targeted, others stabbed at random. A High Court challenge against the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda is being heard this morning. Well, the first flight was due to leave in June after an agreement was signed in April, but that flight was grounded following a series of legal challenges. Well, the move is designed to deter migrants from crossing the Channel, with the Home Office saying Rwanda is fundamentally safe and secure and has a track record of supporting asylum seekers. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Alastair will be back shortly.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello, welcome back. It's 20:11. This is Britain's next Prime Minister with me, Alastair Stewart, here on GB News. We are live on your television, online and DAB radio this morning. Now, small boats brought more than 2,000 migrants across the Channel into the United Kingdom over the last 4 days. In fact, 960 migrants arrived on British soil on Saturday alone. The High Court today will be considering a challenge against the government's plan to deport some of these migrants to Rwanda, a policy that both of the contestants to be the next leader of the Conservative Party have backed. So, will whoever wins, our new Prime Minister, be able to tackle this influx of migrants better than outgoing Boris Johnson and within the law? That's the key question. Here to give the latest is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, first and foremost, we're looking, if people are kind enough to be watching us on telly rather than listening on radio, a not insignificant protest gathering outside the Royal Courts of Justice, now just about to be covered up by a big red bus, but when it clears, people will see. That's a goodly number there. Tell us what's the latest, what's going on, and what's going to be resolved within the court.
Well, the reason we're not in front of the camera for those who are watching on GB News television is just that, sadly, every time any reporter goes in front of the camera at the moment with these particular protesters, they are instantly attracted to either around your camera position and shouting. So we're not doing that. In fact, here comes one anyway, because it clearly does. The second to see you even speaking, they're there. But there are protesters from the various charities, from the Public Services Union, those representing a group of asylum seekers, and some voices as well, as you can see, who want the situation in the Channel brought under control. Alastair, I have some breaking news for you on the latest figures. We can confirm now, according to the Ministry of Defence, that 1,160 people crossed the English Channel yesterday in 25 small boats, which is just incredible, and that is the second highest figure. I think we're talking about 1,200 odd who crossed on the 22nd of August. But that is an enormous figure from yesterday, and that's coupled with 960 who came across on Saturday takes it to well over 2,000 for the weekend. So it shows you, Alastair, the urgency of this judicial review, getting it settled as far as the government is concerned, so they can start this process of sending people to Rwanda.
And Mark, is it specifically then the legality of the scheme generally that's being discussed and debated and resolved within the court, as opposed to the human rights, individual rights, call it what you will, of person A, B and C? This is a general test.
Yes, it is absolutely, and we will see how this goes on over the next 5 days in terms of the evidence that will be put forward by those who are challenging it in the judicial review in terms of Rwanda's human rights record, and of course the British government, which claims that actually Rwanda is an inherently safe place to go. I don't think anyone realistically is claiming that Rwanda is the same as the UK in terms of the freedoms it offers, but is it inherently safe? Well, the British government say that it is, that there are opportunities for those that are allowed to settle in that particular country. But don't forget as well, Alastair, that part of the reason that the government want to send people to Rwanda is a deterrent policy. So it probably suits the British government that Rwanda isn't as free as it would be if you were staying here in the United Kingdom. But is it safe? Will people have opportunities? That's what's being argued over here at the Royal Courts of Justice over the next 5 days.
Fascinating. Mark, thank you very much indeed, and I fully understand why you didn't do that to camera. We had a demonstration of it whilst you were speaking to us. Thank you very much indeed. That's Mark White, there, our Home and Security Editor. Joining me now live is Francis Hoare, who is a lawyer and political commentator. Francis, always good to see you. To be clear, the point I was talking there to Mark about is slightly unusual in the sense that this isn't the rights and wrongs of individual named people being tested. This is a tenet of fundamental government policy that is being tested in the court.
The lawfulness of that policy, but the lawfulness of that policy within the context of human rights of individuals. So there will be individual claimants who are represented in this challenge. They must be, because they otherwise would not have standing. Those people who are bringing the challenge would not have standing to bring it. I think it may be, to put a bit of a caveat on that there are charities who might have standing on it, but if you're raising human rights objections under Section 7, it is, of the Human Rights Act, you need to have you need to be an individual affected by it. So those matters are brought to bear in a general sense. And the lawfulness of this policy is being considered very much with a view to the Article 3 rights. So Article 3 is the protection against torture. Article 2, if there was any risk of death in Rwanda, I don't think that's suggested. And torture and inhuman treatment can include the lack of protection of the state about an individual, of an individual rather.
Yeah, and we are now, what I suppose about 2 hours, slightly less than 2 hours away from knowing who the next leader of the Conservative Party is going to be and who the next Prime Minister, therefore, will be. We know from both of those candidates that if you boil all of this down, it comes in their minds to one thing, and that is, if you can't reform the European Convention on Human Rights, we are out of it and we will have a British Bill of Rights in this country. If that were to be the case now, that court hearing would not be taking place.
Not quite. I think both of them are committed to, well, both of them were certainly when they were in the cabinet and subject to collective responsibility, but are committed to the bill that is currently going through Parliament, which is the Bill of Rights bill, as it's called, but it would be the second Bill of Rights after the 1689 Bill of Rights if it passes. That bill largely, but not exclusively, replicates the the Human Rights Act, which incorporates into English and British law the convention rights under the ECHR. In fact, it isn't the government's policy, and I don't think it's either of the candidates' policy to withdraw from the European Convention of Human Rights. What that bill will do, if it passes, is give the judges very clear and very specific directions, controversial ones, as you can imagine, about how they should interpret particular rights, particularly Article 8, which is the right to a private and family life.
All right, a brilliant clarification, Francis. That's why we ask you to join us as frequently as we do. For the time being, thank you very much indeed. Let's keep in touch.
My pleasure.
And we'll talk again when the 5 days that Mark said it was going to take runs to its end, and we can then reflect on what the judgment there is, or indeed where it goes next. But for the time being, Francis Hall, thank you very much indeed. Now, the next Prime Minister, who we will know very shortly, will have a lot that they need to address. Clearly, war in Europe, in Ukraine. Here, the cost of living crisis, independence referendums, a global recession, and a divided Conservative Party. What should their top priorities be upon entering office tomorrow? Joining me now, I'm delighted to say, is Kevin Hollinrake, who is the Conservative Member of Parliament for Thirsk and Moulton. Great to see you. You've been good enough to talk to me on many occasions throughout this campaign, and you changed who you were backing as candidates fell away. You ended up in the final ballot, I think, backing Rishi Sunak. So how are you feeling now when you're an hour and 10 minutes away from hearing probably that your man's lost?
Well, just a clarification, I supported Rishi right from the start. As soon as the leadership contest was announced, I thought he was the right person. Whether he's lost, we'll find out in 2 hours, Alastair. I really hope he's won. I see the national polls, which everybody's basing these judgments on, that Liz has won handsomely, but we'll see. It certainly is not reflected in my constituency and many other constituencies that we've been working in around the country. So let's see, and let's say we haven't got long before we found out. The main thing is, whoever it is, the party comes together, unites behind them. We've had these contests before, they've been acrimonious before. You'll remember in 2016 we had quite an acrimonious leadership contest. The party united afterwards, and that's what we need to do this time in the interest of the nation, because lots of people are facing some huge challenges, not least low-income households, and I might say as well SMEs, which I know we talked about last time I came into the programme. They're really important we get some support to SMEs.
And Liam Halligan was just underlining that with a very, very big red pen of his, how crucial it is. Let me go back to having slightly misrepresented you, for which I publicly apologise. I'd forgotten that you backed Rishi from the outset, but you did say to me, and it ties in a little bit with your comments about the need to reunite the party, that you wanted quite a profound choice, and you would have liked to have seen someone like Kemi or perhaps Tom Tugendhat or perhaps Penny Mordaunt in that race as well, and that what you've really got is a choice between continuity and a little bit less continuity.
Well, I mean, there's some really good candidates step forward, and I really like Tom and Kemi. I think the two that are left are probably we're always going to be the favourites to be left in the final round. I actually think there's quite a lot of clear blue water between the two different candidates in terms of their philosophy, economic philosophy certainly. That was the biggest differences. It's good now that both parties, both candidates, agree that we need direct support for households and for businesses, because I think that was the critical thing at one point that was missing, say in Liz's campaign, but she's stated quite clearly now there will be that support. So I think people should just wait and see what happens. I know lots of people are worried in my constituency and around the country that support will be made available. It will be made available. We will get through this. There are some longer term challenges we need to tackle as well, not least energy security. And again, both candidates are looking to try and re-domesticate our energy production, which is absolutely the right thing to do, but that will take time. In the short term, we need that direct support, which households will get.
We 100% agree with you on that. Kevin, it's always a pleasure, genuinely, to talk to you. And thanks for finding a moment for us on what I know for all of you down there in Westminster is a busy day. Good to see you, Kevin. Thank you very much indeed. And while Kevin was just finishing that answer, yes, you were looking at pictures of a very, very busy Downing Street with not only domestic cameras and reporters, but literally from all around the world, wanting to know who the next occupant of that building is going to be, number 10 Downing Street. And it's not a sort of silly Britishy thing, but arguably one of the most famous doors in the world, because whoever wins will be greeting world leaders there. We read this morning that if it's Liz Truss, she'll be off to Washington, D.C. to meet up with President Biden there as well. And the White House, stunning building though it is, doesn't have a front door to touch Downing Street. And there's the brilliant view. Downing Street on the right, as Tom said, the red brick building at the bottom there used to be the residency of the Chief Whip. I think it still is, I'm not sure. Then the white bit on the right is the number 11 Downing Street, the Chancellor's residence. And then you've got Downing Street, and the cameraman is generously pulling back a bit. That's the Cabinet Office there, the beginning of it on the right. And if the cameraman can go back, or if you just spotted that's the Cabinet Office there, across the road from it is the Foreign Office. Now you're beginning to see all of the panoply. What a lovely image that is of the magnificent architecture of Whitehall. Going to be buzzing later on. We'll be there. You will not miss a thing. Joining me live now, I'm delighted to say, as advertised, is the former First Minister for Northern Ireland, my friend Dame Arlene Foster, and fellow GB News presenter as well. Lovely to see you, and thanks very much indeed for coming in. This Northern Ireland protocol, let's cut straight to the chase, hangs around her neck, not only because if she wins, she's going to be the next Prime Minister, but she also has been the Foreign Secretary responsible for getting this sorted out for quite some time. It's not been the most successful period in her political life, has it?
Well, she only took over, as you know, from dealing with the protocol when David Frost left in, I think it was late November, December of last year, and she brought forward the protocol bill to try and deal with the issue. You say that it'll hang around her neck. It's certainly been hanging around the necks of the people of Northern Ireland, Alastair, because the protocol, for those of you who don't remember, actually reduces choice for us here in Northern Ireland and increases costs, as if we need any more costs added on to the cost of living here in Northern Ireland, because there are checks between Great Britain and Northern Ireland internally in the United Kingdom, and she has committed, including at the hustings in Belfast, to deal with that, and to also, and this is a critical point, she made the pledge in Belfast that the primacy of the UK law would be clear. In other words, it wouldn't be the European courts who would be determining what happens in Northern Ireland in relation to single market regulations, but the United Kingdom courts, and that was very much welcomed by those of us here in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The point I was making, though, is that although the real pain is felt on the ground in Northern Ireland, and I've spoken to several of the business people within your community, within that community, and as it were, feel their pain. But you, as a political class in Northern Ireland, can't do anything about it other than wait for the Westminster government to crack it. Has she got the oomph, if she's the winner, to look Brussels in the eye and see them off?
Well, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, Alastair. She certainly has talked a good game during the leadership contest. She certainly portrayed herself as someone who not only technically believed in the union, but emotionally believed in the union, and therefore she wants to protect the union. It was on that basis that I said I preferred Liz Truss going into number 10 to Rishi Sunak. I do hope that she deals with it. Look, I accept there are huge issues to be dealt with on week one. Energy costs, which of course feed in then to inflation and the cost of living. There's the Ukraine issue. There is international issues, immigration issues coming across the channel. But for us in Northern Ireland, this is about citizenship. This is about being treated as the same as the rest of our colleagues and friends in Great Britain, and therefore it's critical that it's dealt with early on.
Final quick one, and I think we've got about a minute if I'm to believe what I'm being shouted at in my ear. Forget all the politics for a moment. A purely personal question. As a former First Minister, you've been there and done it. What do you think is going through Liz Truss's mind right now as she waits with just a little over an hour to go before she hears whether she's won this ballot and tomorrow will be kissing hands with Her Majesty the Queen? What's going through her mind as a human being?
Well, she's known for some time that she's been the firm favourite, so all of the preparation work will have hopefully been carried out by now. But there'll be an incredible buzz. 101 things will be going through her mind at this point in time. If she's anything like me, she'll be thinking about whether she is right for the job, whether she's going to confidently do what she wants to do. And I believe she's passionate about the United Kingdom, Alastair. And let's see what she can deliver. But it's a very exciting day, a very sad day, let's be honest, for Boris Johnson, who will have to give a speech tomorrow morning, as I understand it, and go up with her to Her Majesty the Queen in Balmoral. But look, we know what politics is like, Alastair. On one day somebody is up and somebody else is down.
Ali, great to see you. Thanks for finding time for us. Arlene Foster, their former First Minister. And as Linda says, picking up in an email to me, I'll never forgive the Conservative Party for ousting Boris Johnson. I will not vote for them again. I cancelled my membership immediately. That will be very high on Liz Truss's agenda as well, if she wins. Do keep all of your thoughts coming into us. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk, tweet me or tweet us at GBNews. Lots more to come after this break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales
and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome. It's 1 minute past 11. This is GB News with me, Alastair Stewart, and I'll be with you for the next hour or so, building up to the announcement of the winner of the Conservative Party leadership race and, of course, by definition, the announcement of who will be Britain's next Prime Minister. Do make sure that you get in touch with your views, as usual, on gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those throughout the programme. I've had some crackers already, more to come. But first, let's bring you right up to date with today's news. Here's Rosie.
Good morning and thank you, Alastair. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 11. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. So the country's new Prime Minister and the winner of the Conservative Party leadership contest will be announced at 12:30 today. After weeks of campaigning, Liz Truss, who's widely tipped to win the vote, and Rishi Sunak will finally learn who'll be given the keys to number 10. The priority for the new Prime Minister will be the cost of living crisis. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, is reportedly considering a freeze on energy bills. The MP, Mark Harper, has been backing her opponent, Rishi Sunak. He says, though, the party should support whoever wins.
I want the parliamentary party to come behind Liz if she wins today. You know, I'm sure she'll be very conscious of the fact that in the MP rounds of this contest, she got about a third of Conservative MPs supporting her. So she'll be wanting to get Conservative MPs behind her so that as she deals with difficult issues this winter, you know, and she's not going to get much of a gap. It's going to have to be announcing that energy package very soon, that people can unite behind her, and it's a team process.
The Shadow Justice Secretary Steve Reed told us that neither candidate is the fresh start the country needs.
There really are two peas in a pod, both of them senior members in the government. Liz Truss, actually the longest serving member of the cabinet, who voted for all the things that she spent the last few weeks trying to distance herself from, including all 15 of Boris Johnson's tax hikes. Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, they're not the fresh start that this country needs. For that, we need a general election and the election of a Labour government, because either of these will simply be more of the same.
The new Prime Minister will formally be appointed by the Queen at Balmoral tomorrow. Of course, we've got full coverage of the contest here on GB News. Don't miss any of it. Now, in some other news and some breaking news in the last half an hour, there's been another arrest in connection with the death of the 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Korbel in Liverpool. We can find out more and speak to our reporter Sophie Reaper, who's in the city. Sophie, good morning. What more do we know about this latest arrest?
Good morning. This is the fourth man who's now been arrested, or that we found out was arrested yesterday, should I say, in relation to Olivia's murder. The 34-year-old man was pulled over on the M42 near Leamington Spa yesterday. The vehicle has now been seized and the man has been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. We also know that a 34-year-old was arrested yesterday, a man from Liverpool, on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, and a 41-year-old man and a 29-year-old man were both arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. Now, there have now been 6 arrests made in total in relation to Olivia's murder, as Merseyside police remain determined to find her killer.
Sophie, thank you very much. On the ground for us in Liverpool. Now, police in Canada are hunting for 2 men suspected of killing 10 people in a wave of stabbings in Saskatchewan. The suspects' name is Damien and Miles Sanderson are accused of launching attacks across 13 crime scenes. At least 15 other people were injured. Police say it appears that some of the victims were targeted, others were stabbed at random. The High Court here has been told Rwanda is an authoritarian state that tortures and murders those it considers to be opponents. A 5-day hearing's underway over a challenge against the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to the country. The first flight was due to leave in June after an agreement was signed in April, but that flight was grounded following a series of legal challenges. The move had been designed by the Home Office to deter migrants from crossing the Channel, with the Home Office saying Rwanda is fundamentally safe and secure and has a track record of supporting asylum seekers. The RAC is saying that petrol drivers continue to get a raw deal at the pumps despite a record drop in the price of petrol last month. Now, they say that the average forecourt prices dropped over 12 pence to 169.8 pence per litre at the end of August. That's the largest monthly fall since records began. But the car company says current wholesale prices mean customers should be paying around 161 pence per litre. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are going to make their first public appearance in the UK since returning for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. They're heading to Manchester today for the One Young World Summit. It's an event bringing together young leaders from more than 190 countries. Well, their security here is under scrutiny. The Duke's currently bringing legal action against the Home Office after a ruling that Harry couldn't pay for police protection for him and his family when they're here in the UK. You're now up to date on GB News, and I'll bring you more as it happens. Shortly, we'll be back to Alastair.
Rosie, thank you very much indeed. Good morning. It is indeed GB News with me, Alastair Stewart, live on your TV, radio and online. I asked for your comments and you have been doing quite brilliantly. John in Suffolk says the old-fashioned concept of giving jobs to opponents needs consigning to the bin. Liz Truss, if she wins, needs to appoint a team all working together. No leaks, no anonymous briefings, a strong single message. Cabinet is what is needed. Frank, and there have been many in my trade as well as the world of politics who will sympathise with this. Frank says, whoever wins, I hope it's Liz Truss, they should postpone the party conferences and just get on with the business. And finally, Alan, Sunak cooked his goose during the very first televised hustings when he constantly shouted Truss down. Very interesting. All thoughts are welcome, and we will pick the good ones out, the amusing ones, and even risk one or two of the naughty ones as we continue with our coverage. Now, I'm delighted this morning now just to be joined live in the studio by a very old friend of mine, Scarlett Maguire. Scarlett's a former Labour advisor, and I'm asking her to look at how the next Prime Minister is going to work with the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. As support grows for the party, I was talking to Lord Robert Hayward earlier on and saying it's an intriguing moment, and you know me, totally impartial on this one,
Absolutely.
where your party hasn't only shown itself to be slightly ahead in the polls, but most of the pollsters are saying it's now in the territory where it could actually form a government. Hell of a challenge for whoever wins, almost certainly Liz.
And actually, also the poll shows that people prefer Keir to Liz Truss. So he's got to really go for it now. He's got to understand.
Can I butt in without being picky, because I know what you're talking about there. Prefer or think he'd make a better Prime Minister? There's a subtle difference there.
Well, they think that they would vote for him as Prime Minister. I mean, I don't know whether they prefer him as a person.
Which was something Jeremy Corbyn never achieved in any of the polls.
Never, ever achieved. No, absolutely. Although he did get closer than one thought to Theresa May in the 2017 election. No, I think that that what Keir Starmer's got to do, and they will be taking it really seriously, is to work out how, to begin with, how to deal with Liz Truss at Prime Minister's questions.
Which is Wednesday.
Which is Wednesday, yeah. And he's got. I mean, one of the things Keir's got to do is he's got to start asking short questions and then having the riposte ready. Now, the question is whether she does a Boris Johnson and ignores the question completely, or whether she actually doubles down and answers it and says it. Now, I think to begin with, she will want to answer the question, or as somebody put it today, answer questions that haven't quite been asked yet. So I think it'll be a very interesting clash on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's why we're so excited. I mean, we've known each other for so long. That's why live news is so fantastic. So here we are Monday with a party election. Tuesday, Balmoral, the handover of power. Wednesday, back into the House of Commons, and bish, bash, bosh across the dispatch box. It's question time. I want to ask you something else as well, and please don't treat it as an open goal. Trusting you now. Truss team hold talks on freezing energy bills. The Tories rejected the idea of capping the cap, and then they kind of embraced it. The Tories rejected bunging money left, right and centre, particularly Liz's camp.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the voters, and now they're embracing it. And now, lo and behold, here's yet another policy that came from the leader of the opposition and looks like possibly, if the papers are to be believed, being embraced by the woman who's going to be the next Tory Prime Minister.
Yes, and actually she had very little choice. I mean, she has to.
It's economically bonkers. I mean, if you read the article, it's talking about that policy would cost almost as much as furlough, £70-odd billion, plus God knows how big the bailouts would be to the energy companies, because the global prices, as Liam Halligan was just saying, they're not something, Keir Starmer and Liz Truss agree, let's lower our prices. They're not. That's the whole problem. It is juvenile economics and politics.
Alastair, that's the least of what she's going to do, right? She's also going to do tax cuts. She's also going to reverse the national insurance. She is going to throw billions and billions, because what she's said is, we can borrow. I mean, I find her economic thing absolutely shocking. I mean, there is no question. I mean, since she started running and started talking about economics, you just think this is a woman who doesn't really get economics, and her advisors
she doesn't
are
get
very
the Treasury
frightening.
orthodoxy.
Well, she hates the Treasury orthodoxy.
No, absolutely. Well, so did Margaret Thatcher in 1979.
Yes, but Margaret Thatcher actually didn't put in tax cuts for quite a while. Liz Truss has, I mean, she's promised to reverse the national insurance. She's promised tax cuts almost immediately. She says it doesn't matter, that they're only going to affect, you know, about half the country, and the richest will get richer, because what she says is the Treasury orthodoxy is redistributive, and we've got to stop that. I mean, she's going to be a very interesting Prime Minister.
I love it. No,
I mean, I don't know
all
how
I'm
much
saying is just
support
because
she'll
somebody embraces a new orthodoxy and throws out the old orthodoxy doesn't mean to say that they are profoundly wrong. I quote Margaret Thatcher, I'll take you back even further, Clement Attlee after the war, saying, do you know what, actually, we can run shipbuilding, coal mining and the rest of it, steel, better than the free enterprise sector. You know, these moments do occasionally happen. There was also our mutual friend T. Blair, Esquire, who said to the trade unions, you can't have Clause 4 anymore. We're now back in charge. I mean, these moments are magical, but they can be viable and they can work. Give her a break.
They can work, there you were saying this is crazy. I think
that particular policy is crazy.
You said, but it is as nothing compared to what she's going to do with tax cuts and the national. And she's got to do something about energy. I mean, she might talk about, you know, I don't like how.
No, I accept that.
She's got to make sure that poor people are not out on the streets starving, right?
But if her new orthodoxy, as you just brilliantly described, about cutting taxes and boosting borrowing, which a lot of old-fashioned Tories, I mean, it'd be very interesting to see Jacob Rees-Mogg's reaction to that, sitting around the cabinet table if he's going to be there as well.
He must know about
No, I know.
it.
Well,
I mean, she hasn't kept it secret.
Maybe one is reflecting upon it. We shall see. But here's the real twist to it. If you're right, for example, that actually she doesn't seem to understand economics, you're not simply saying that you disagree with her, you're saying she doesn't even get it, then it means that Sir Keir Starmer and his team, Rachel Reeves and people like that, are going to have to stand up and say to Liz Truss, your tax cuts are wrong, your borrowing levels are wrong, which is going to beg me and you and others to say, OK, so what would you do? Then you'd increase taxes, you'd reduce borrowing. Come on, she could have argued you lot right into a corner.
Yes, I mean, I think what Rachel Reeves is going to say is now is not the time for a tax cut. And actually, the other thing she's going to say...
That'll play well behind the red wall.
Oh, no, but I mean, a lot of people I think you forget how many people don't pay tax. I mean, actually, they don't earn... Something like 40% of the country do not pay tax. And
that's the crucial personal allowance thing, which everybody wants. So you can earn 15, 20 grand before you pay a penny in tax or national insurance.
And in the red wall, you know, it's not like... I mean, there are masses of people on under 20,000, right? Let alone, you know, the number of women who work part-time, and men who are forced to work part-time. And, you know, you look at the gig economy, you look at Deliveroo, and these people aren't earning enough to pay tax. I mean, tax cuts are great. They're great for people with money, right? For people who earn a lot, or pensioners with an awful lot of savings.
What was your interpretation? And Labour Party supporter, just to remind folk who are kind enough to be listening to our conversation, not in a silly way, but it colours how they listen to your answer. When Liz Truss answered Laura Kuenssberg on the television yesterday with that assertion that those tax cuts, exactly the point you've just made, are going to help wealthier folks so much more, Liz didn't deny or dance around on the head of a pin. Liz Truss said, yeah?
Yep, and that's fair. That's what she said. That's fair. That's fine. It's fine. And we're talking... This is a country in which the rich have got richer and the poor have got poorer. I mean, whatever Liz thinks about redistributive, it hasn't been working. And she is going to make sure it really doesn't work. Tax cuts benefit the rich. And that's what one has to remember. And they cost an awful lot of money. At the same time, we have a health service on its knees. We have schools that say they can't open 5 days a week because of the energy crisis, let alone the crumbling thing, let alone, you know, trying to keep the staff. I mean, we have a public sector that has been starved of funds since...
Oh, no, come on, you can't say that. That's simply not true.
Come on, look at the schools. Look at the schools. There has been no building of schools.
Billions of taxpayers' money that's been thrown at the schools and the health service. I mean, every time the health service goes, ouch, there's another 10 billion for them. The schools, I agree, are facing a tricky time, but you cannot say that in the last 4 or 5 years, Boris Johnson's premiership, last 3.5 years, that they haven't had money. This isn't George Osborne austerity. Public sector borrowing has gone up. Public sector spending has gone up. Sunak himself said it's now about 50% of gross domestic product. Never been bigger.
No, but it's not being put in the right place. I mean, schools are saying, you know, we are falling apart. We're not having a schools building programme. Schools are saying, how are we going to pay our energy bills? That's what the schools are saying. You know, these are head teachers. This isn't you know, left-wing unions, right?
I have one of them in my family.
Absolutely, and it's a serious thing.
Yeah.
There is a serious problem about schools. I mean, you know, how are hospitals going to pay their energy bills,
We shall see.
frankly?
I have to stop it there. I always enjoy talking to you because I can put the really blunt questions to you, but I always get an honest and candid answer. Lovely to see you.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Scarlett Maguire there. Now, the polls are, as we've just been discussing, and indeed with all of my guests, and goodness me, we're going to have egg on our face at 12:30 if we're wrong. All the polls are tipping the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, to win the leadership race. But if she wins, will she last? I'll be discussing that with Nigel Nelson, the political editor of the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday People. And finally, the most pressing thing on the mind of the new Prime Minister as well, the economy. We'll be talking a little more about that as well as the programme proceeds. Just a little reminder, it's now 20 minutes past 11 and we are expecting an announcement at the QE2 Centre in London by the chairman of the 1922 Committee of Backbench Tory MPs as to who has won, be it Liz or be it Rishi, be it Ms Truss or Mr Sunak. So let's now go to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is indeed inside the QE2, where that announcement dramatically will be made. We were talking to Tom outside number 10. Now we're with you. All of the stage is set for this high drama.
Yeah, indeed, Alastair. The stage is literally set, as you can see in the background, for that announcement. We're expected to hear from Sir Graham Brady at 12:34 here in Westminster, in which he will announce the new Conservative leader and the person, of course, who will become the next Prime Minister. They will then make a speech at 12:37, so we want just over an hour and 15 minutes time. Is it going to be Liz Truss? Well, almost certainly yes. I mean, we'll have to eat an awful lot of humble pie. There'll be eggs, not even eggs, omelettes on our faces if we've got it wrong, but almost certainly Liz Truss will win this election. And then that sets in a whole series of events, because of course she doesn't become immediately the Prime Minister. That is going to happen tomorrow, where both her and Boris Johnson are going to travel up to Balmoral to see the Queen. The current Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, of course, will tender his resignation. Liz Truss will then enter the room. The Queen will ask her to form a government. She will then travel back down to London. We're expecting Boris Johnson, though, to give one last speech outside number 10 tomorrow morning, and Liz Truss to do so tomorrow afternoon, probably around 4 p.m. She will then announce who her new cabinet is. And all this, of course, ahead of what is going to prove, as you've just been discussing, a very, very busy couple of weeks in politics, in which, frankly, some of those big economic decisions that have been put off, those big decisions on energy prices, will have to be made, and made pretty quickly.
We're drawing to a conclusion there. I've no idea who those lovely people are, but we're taking live shots of Downing Street and a couple of chaps without ties on and a woman with a phone in her hand. And I'm just kind of guessed that they probably work there because, yep, the door's been open for them. They don't have to do the rat-a-tat-tat bit. Just to underline, and you know this world much better than I, a change at the top, be it Truss or be it Sunak, means a profound change within that whole street and that whole jungle of politics in Whitehall. Literally hundreds and hundreds of men and women not just holding ministerial jobs.
Yeah, indeed, of course, there are, as you say, hundreds of people who work inside that building and indeed across Whitehall. Many of them have done so under Boris Johnson, many of them very political, of course, working for the Conservative Party directly and not just for the civil service. Some of those will lose their jobs. They will be out on the rear. In fact, many of them today essentially are logging off their computers this morning and waiting for new people, frankly, to turn up even as early as this afternoon when that announcement is made. And that will be the same case as people prepare for a new government. We know that behind closed doors over the last couple of weeks, Alastair, that Liz Truss has been essentially meeting with civil servants, meeting with senior officials in different government departments, has been plotting for who will serve in her cabinet. Essentially, she has been preparing for government for the last couple of weeks, already lining up, as I say, those cabinet ministers, lining up some of those big decisions that will have to be made pretty quickly. And yes, it will be changing. Politics is a brutal business in many regards. We have to remember that as well. There'll be many people over the next 24 hours who will lose their jobs inside Number 10. Many have not even had those jobs, given the turbulence in politics, for very long. But in the end, ultimately, whoever works behind the scenes, the big moment will come here in just over an hour's time, in which Britain will almost certainly have its third female Prime Minister. It will be a very significant moment, and a very significant moment, it must be said, for Liz Truss as well. She's been an MP for 12 years. She is the longest serving Cabinet Minister, it must be said, having served in various different departments, including in DEFRA, in international trade, and of course as Foreign Secretary for the last couple of years. But this has been a big personal journey for her, and it'll be a very significant moment, as I say, when she takes that stage, makes a speech, becomes the new Conservative leader, and will be on track tomorrow to become our new Prime Minister.
Absolutely fascinating, and we will not miss a jot or comma of it, because you will be there live for us, Darren. Thank you very much indeed for that background and for being where you are. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor, with the stage set for the announcement in 1 hour and 10 minutes or so. Helen says, I really appreciate all the views of Downing Street and the surrounds and Alastair's mini geography lesson. As a northerner, I don't get down very often. It all helps to make sense of the place. You see, we are the people's channel, Helen. That's why we do it. Lena says, I too have cancelled my Tory membership. The treacherous MPs have shown contempt for the electorate's vote. I won't vote Tory again. There you go. That's the second person to have said it. Joan, I would never have voted for Mr Sunak, no matter what he offered, because to me, loyalty is everything, and it's quite obvious that he showed Boris Johnson none. And finally, Sean says, I don't trust a Prime Minister who's elected by 140,000 Conservative members as opposed to 40 million national voters. Bring on the general election. Keep those comments coming. We love to hear what you think. After the break, the Conservative leadership race will be coming to an end today, with a new Prime Minister announced at 12:30 and confirmed in Balmoral tomorrow. That is the scene right now. Live in Downing Street, as you saw with Darren. We are also live across in the QE2 Centre, about half a mile from there, where the announcement will be made, and then it'll all be live and bubbly and bouncy. Stay with us here on GB News, TV and radio, DAB, online. You won't miss a thing.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters, with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back. Just inching up towards 11:30. This is an election special with me, Alastair Stewart, and we are awaiting to hear at 12:30 today who is going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, and by dint of that, our next Prime Minister as well. We are bringing you all of the latest live from Downing Street, from the QE2 Centre, where it will actually be announced, here on TV, online and on radio this morning. We've also been asking you to give your views. As you look now, that's the scene in Downing Street. I mean, the offices on the right are pretty busy and hopping along, and on the left of your picture is a buzz of the world's media to make sure that you don't miss a thing. I rather hope that the news editors who sent them there to get that magnificent picture of number 10 Downing Street that we're all enjoying at the moment realise that the real dramatic action in 1 hour's time, there we are, you see, we have a brilliant news editors here at GB News, is there. And I've no idea who the little gathering of people taking their seats already, but I imagine that's the great and the good of the Conservative Party come to hear what they've done. The election was run by the 1922 Committee of Backbench Tory MPs, chaired by Sir Graham Brady. He himself admitted that he thought it had gone on a bit long, but the fact that many people still came along to all of the hustings suggested to him in the end that no, maybe it was the right thing to do. But also there's been a furore about whether Boris Johnson should have been on the ballot paper or not. Anyway, it came down to two, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, and in exactly 1 hour's time, right there, Darren McCaffrey will be with us live as Sir Graham announces who the winner is. Now, in addition to that, we've also been asking you at home for your views. Colin says, you asked the question, when was the damage done to Rishi? Simple, his tax affairs and his wife totally lost credibility with us members. I think he'd been standing against Mickey Mouse. He would still have lost. I don't agree, Colin, as it happens. I think that he was right about tax cuts and being the Thatcherite candidate. I think Liz Truss actually read the room better and said, whatever the textbooks say, we're going to go with tax cuts right now. John says the Liz Truss premiership will all depend on what she does for working class people. They always vote Labour and the rich always vote Tory. No, they didn't. They voted in their thousands during the 1980s for one Margaret Thatcher. That's why she won, and that's why she had big majorities. And finally, 81-year-old Dave from Devon says, "Morning, Alastair. I'm sure that both candidates are highly commendable people in their own right, but unfortunately, as I've said to you in the past, the current crop of parliamentarians have failed to inspire me with confidence, especially in the current crisis." Thank you all for those thoughts. So Liz Truss is leading the polls to be the next Prime Minister, and for the first time ever, Mr Johnson and his successor will go to Balmoral rather than Buckingham Palace for the appointment of the new Prime Minister. But how long will they last? My next guest wrote a brilliant story on the front page of his newspaper yesterday, Nigel Nelson, the political editor of the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday People, and joins me live. So I'm picking up slightly on what 81-year-old Dave from Devon said. "I don't trust this lot, the current crop aren't really up to it." If you're to be believed, they're up to plotting to topple a Prime Minister they haven't even elected yet.
Yeah, which I found absolutely extraordinary. And all I was doing was reporting what I was being told. I think it's a completely madcap scheme. But anyway, there are a dozen Tories who have been in communication with each other. They are plotting to get rid of Liz Truss. Letters of no confidence could go in as soon as this week. And what they want is to get Boris Johnson back, which I think is probably what Boris Johnson wants as well.
As you know, Nigel, because you're kind enough to join us on this channel quite often, is that we always ask folk out there what they think, and there's a big body of opinion. Boris, they shouldn't have done it to him, and this, that, and the other. But I'll tell you what's intriguing. I was working over the weekend and had the joy of Tim Montgomery on the programme. I'm no great friend of Boris Johnson, as everybody knows, but he did work for him. And I discussed your story with Tim Montgomery, and he said, interesting, I'm not actually hearing contradiction to what Mr. Nelson is writing.
Well, I mean, as I said, what I was reporting, this is what I'm being told. It is a serious plot. They're obviously keeping their identities very quiet, and they're certainly communicating very quietly as well. They don't want anything on sort of WhatsApp groups and stuff like that. But the idea, what they would need is they'd need 54 letters, as we know, to actually trigger a no-confidence vote. They think they might be able to get that by the end of the year, early next year. We'll see what happens. But I don't think the country itself would wear it if we went back to another leadership election during the current crisis and then allowed just 0.4% of the electorate to decide another Prime Minister, or indeed getting the previous one back.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely 100% right, and I think that there are more Brendas from Bristol than there are plotters. Final question, Nigel, and it's a serious one. We've both watched this stuff come and go over many, many years. If it is Liz Truss, can't she extinguish a lot of that disquiet within the parliamentary party by patronage? There are junior ministerial jobs. Forget about the cabinet for a moment. That may be done and dusted. But there are junior jobs, there are envoyships, there are select committees and the rest of it. If she wins, she has huge power to spread the goodies.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. And if I was advising Liz Truss, I'm rather glad I'm not, but if I was, that's what I'd be suggesting she does for the sake of party unity. So you hand out jobs both at cabinet level and junior ministerial level to people who are not necessarily your supporters. At the moment, there's no sign she's doing that. You've got to remember, only a third of the parliamentary party supported Liz Truss. She got 113 votes at the final Commons election. And had it been left to MPs, Rishi Sunak will be going to Balmoral tomorrow to meet the Queen, and not Liz Truss.
Nigel, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Nigel Nelson there, political editor of the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday People. Keep in touch. After the break, we will be live once again in Downing Street with Tom Harwood. There it is. That's the picture now. He's stepped out of the way, so your view of that lovely door and the two windows is not spoiled. But we will be getting the very latest from him, and also from Northern Ireland with our reporter Dougie Beattie. But before that, let's bring you right up to date with all of the day's news. There is other things going on. Here's Rosie.
Thanks, Alastair. It's 11:35. Let's get you up to date. The winner of the Conservative Party leadership contest will be announced in just under an hour's time at 12:30. After weeks now of campaigning, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will finally learn who will become Prime Minister and be given the keys to number 10. The priority for the next Prime Minister will be dealing with the cost of living. Ms Truss, who's widely tipped to win the vote, is reportedly considering a freeze on energy bills. The new Prime Minister will formally be appointed by the Queen at Balmoral tomorrow. We'll have full live coverage of the announcement here on GB News. Now, 4 men have been arrested in connection with the death of Olivia Pratt-Korbel in Liverpool in the past 24 hours. The 9-year-old was killed by a gunman as he chased his intended target into her home last month. Her mother was also injured. A 34-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, and 3 others have been detained on suspicion of assisting an offender. The High Court's been told Rwanda is an authoritarian state that tortures and murders those it considers to be opponents. It's hearing a challenge against the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to the country. The Home Office, which is trying to deter migrants from crossing the Channel, says Rwanda is an authoritarian state. The hearing started today and will continue for 5 days. The latest figures show more than 2,000 people crossed the English Channel over the weekend. Well, GB News analysis of the data shows almost 27,500 have crossed so far this year. That's just short of the 28,500 people who made the journey over the whole of last year. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Alastair will be back shortly.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello, it's, what is it? It's 20 to 12, and this is an election special with me, Alastair Stewart. We're waiting to hear at 12:30 today who will be the next leader of the Conservative Party and, by dint of that, our next Prime Minister. We're bringing you the latest live on TV, online and radio this morning. And, of course, we are returning to our top story throughout not only the remaining part of my programme, but all of the next programmes coming up on GB News as this story unfolds. Who will be Britain's next Prime Minister? You've been sending in your opinions as well, which we always love to hear from you. Anthony says, I think it's great. Liz Truss or Sunak, a sure way to a Labour government in 2 years. Tony Blair was Tory light. That and the Tories screwed the people, sold off to foreigners and to continue to increase the wealth gap as Truss intends. Well, Anthony, it's a view with which I profoundly disagree, but we do believe in sharing them. I think, as I said earlier on to many of my guests, the jury is out. It's a brand new package of economic policies. Wait until you get them. And as Scarlett Maguire herself, a Labour supporter, said, then we'll really see how Labour react to it. Richard says, in a country of over 66 million people, we are reduced to a choice between Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss. Surely we could have done later. And more of you again saying, because of the Boris dimension to the story, you are cancelling your membership of the Conservative Party. On the right of your screen, if you're watching on television, is the scene live outside Downing Street, where the events will culminate, although the declaration will actually be in the QE2 Centre, where Darren was just a moment ago. But let's go live now to our political correspondent, who is in the midst of all of that, somewhere there in Downing Street. It's Tom. So I'm intrigued by that in a way, because Darren was just saying it all happens at the QE2 Centre. But until Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak kisses hands, as they say, with Her Majesty the Queen, they're not Prime Minister. So neither of them got any right to come to where you are right now.
Whilst that is true, Alastair, things happen immediately following the announcement. I have been gone from my little spot here in the big media pen just for a little while. I've been inside number 9 Downing Street, where we have our daily briefings from the Prime Minister's official spokesman, and we have learned some of the choreography that goes on through this afternoon and indeed into tomorrow. And one of those items of choreography is the moment that we hear either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak has won the Tory leadership. The transition starts from that moment. So whilst Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, probably Liz Truss, will not be walking into Downing Street today, that's after the kissing of the hands of the Queen takes place tomorrow in Balmoral, there will be senior staff having conversations about that transition. Liz Truss will be picking people to run her operation in Downing Street, and those conversations and handovers will be happening the moment that we hear the conclusion of the Tory leadership race. So no, the Prime Minister will still be Boris Johnson, but those staff that run the place, they'll be having those transition talks, and that will all be beginning from this afternoon. So no doubt a lot of activity in the building behind me, if not on the street. And moving beyond that, we've also learnt a little bit about what Boris Johnson is up to today. Boris is currently working in Downing Street. He's working in Downing Street all of today, and we learned that he is going to have a call with President Zelensky of Ukraine a little bit later this afternoon. Although his official spokesman wouldn't say whether he'd be watching the announcement of his successor or not.
Oh, how intriguing. Talk to your friends rather than watch your enemies fighting over your legacy. Who knows? Tom, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Stay exactly where you are. Regain your little live spot so that we don't miss a thing later on as the afternoon unfolds. Tom Harwood there, our political reporter, live in Downing Street. Our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, is in Stormont for us right now, and there he is. Great to see you, Dougie. I was talking to Arlene Foster a little earlier on this programme live, and she was saying, you know, it may not be the biggest priority across the entire United Kingdom, but getting that protocol sorted, getting Brexit done is the absolute priority for folk upon whom you report and with whom you commune.
Indeed it is, and it's causing serious problems in Northern Ireland, as we've reported on many, many times. But I suppose the real things that will be coming across whoever it may be's desk who wants to be PM, why, when you look at the problems that will be facing them, you would have to ask yourself, would you want that job? And of course will be the cost of living. In amongst that is fuel. That may actually turn Liz Truss into an anti-Thatcherite. Margaret Thatcher or close the mines, she may have to open them and allow fracking. And of course, food. Food is the biggest part on the index that's rising the quickest. And about 2 weeks ago, I travelled through Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England, finding out exactly what the problems were with farming and why the cost of living in and around food was rising so much. It appears from 2016 we haven't had a common agricultural policy, so no business plan for the region. So each region is trying to force and do their own thing. And the one policies that have been put in place are environmental or green policies, and that is causing problems for farmers because they have no way of passing that on through their own business, so it comes straight to us in the checkout. Employment on farms and in smaller jobs, if you like, will also have to be looked at. These zero-hour contracts or agency workers, they found when they went into the pandemic that a lot of them couldn't get furlough because they had no real income within the 16 weeks. So they fell straight into the trap of benefits. And in those benefits, some of them can be very lucrative. And of course, those people now do not want to come back to work. And that includes civil servants that are staying at home and then not supporting businesses in the centre of the cities. And that will cause clashes with working conditions with unions. And of course, both of these people have said that they're going to shrink the state. They need to shrink it, and to do that, they must have good negotiations, not only with the unions, but also with devolved institutions, a problem that Margaret Thatcher never ever had, because during her time there was no such things as institutions. So take away from that the national health, a war in Ukraine, and the dreaded Northern Ireland Protocol, and this new Prime Minister will be in for a very, very rough ride, and all inside 18 months.
Absolutely fascinating stuff, Dougie. Thank you very much indeed for bringing us right up to date. So if you're at home listening to that, reflecting with what Dougie said there, but also with what Arlene was saying earlier on, it may not be big on her list of priorities, if indeed it is Liz Truss who wins, but there's a lot to be done there, and a lot of people who will be waiting to see what is made of it. Very important part of the political agenda. I'm delighted now to be joined by one of those magical coincidences, by another old friend of mine, Patrick O'Flynn, columnist and political commentator, but with a passion for as long as we've known each other about Brexit and about leaving the European Union and get Brexit done, which brought Boris Johnson into power with an 80-seat majority that's all gone. Northern Ireland is about Brexit. Getting the protocol sorted is about Brexit. The European Convention on Human Rights has an element to do with it as well. Do you think that Liz Truss is up to that agenda?
I think those are important parts of her agenda. I think the Northern Ireland Protocol, to be honest now, has limited salience across the broader UK-wide electorate because there are so many other problems crashing in. Obviously, the cost of living rooted in energy is the number one issue. We read that. I think the totemic issue among Tory-leaning voters she's got to crack is the Channel migrant shambles. Over 2,000 more this weekend. Boris talked a good game on it throughout his premiership, never delivered, to be honest, never really tried to deliver.
Mark White told us live on the programme an hour ago, 1,160 people yesterday alone. In 25 small boats. And Francis Hoare, the barrister, told us live on this programme that the right of Her Majesty's democratically elected government to run its Rwanda policy was being contested live in court this very morning.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Now, the Rwanda policy, you know, is it going to crack this? I doubt it. If it goes ahead, it won't go ahead at big enough scale. If Suella Braverman is Liz Truss's new Home Secretary, I think her instincts are that we need to pull out of the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights and you know, completely take back control of our border policy.
Is there a middle ground, which, again, Francis Hoare, the lawyer, said in conversation with me earlier on, and that is that you don't actually have to revoke our membership of the European Convention on Human Rights, but you publish a British Bill of Rights that tells British courts When you're judging these matters, you listen to what our sovereign parliament has to say before you listen to, even if it goes back to Churchill's time, what Europe is saying.
Well, there is that, and I think we heard during the contest that Liz Truss would prefer to try that out first and see if that kind of is a sort of Damocles over the European judges to stop them defending. I just think that the Tory-leaning electorate, including Red Wall voters, if the government won't deal with this issue, possibly pulling out of some other international conventions as well, then Liz Truss will be in massive trouble and the morale of the Tory-leaning vote will crash. So, yes, cost of living, absolutely, but her key thing this autumn for me is to really crack this issue with radical policies.
Fascinating. Patrick, always good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Patrick O'Flynn there, old friend of mine, as I say, political commentator, top journalist and all the rest of it, with his views on the significance of Brexit and particularly the challenge of what's going on day in, day out in the Channel. Now, here's the scene. At 9 minutes to 12, and we have been told with crystal clarity that although the main drama will be at the QE2 Centre, that big old grey conference centre just across from Westminster Abbey. That's where the declaration will be made. But Tom Harwood reminded us that number 10 is as busy as ever. Boris Johnson, the outgoing Prime Minister, is still in there working on papers. Who knows, maybe resignation on his list. That's the scene inside the QE2 conference centre. 4 or 5 times as many people now nick their seats. It's a bit like going to a wedding, isn't it? You try and get as close to the front on the left if you possibly can. There they are, ordinary members of the Conservative Party getting in there for the announcement, and Darren McCaffrey will be there live for you as well. The winner of the Tory leadership contest will be announced, as I say, 12:30 today. Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, finally discovering which of them will replace Boris Johnson in number 10. There is no doubt in my mind, or those of most people, that the economy is top of the debate as the United Kingdom battles with the cost of living crisis and rising inflation at the pounding heart of it, fuelled not least by energy. Liz Truss has announced that she'll plan to cut taxes, boost economic growth, which has been widely criticised by economists, not only in her political opponent party, but also within her own side. And Rishi Sunak himself has said in the past that it will only fuel inflation. Are they right? To end this section of our coverage, I'm delighted to be joined now by John O'Connell, who is the Chief Executive of the Taxpayers Alliance. And there he is sitting next to me live. I'm going to come to the Thatcher legacy bit in a moment, if I may. But first things first, given what she's said up to now, really expanded in the interview with Koonsberg yesterday, does it work?
Well, I think we're at a position where we've got a 70-year high tax burden. So taxes are part of a big cost of living. In fact, they're one of the biggest elements of everybody's cost of living. So
it's that old thing about you have to work until July before you actually earn anything that you can keep.
Yeah, you know, it's certainly, you know, half the year, you know, for many people when you wrap in other taxes. But yeah, absolutely, it's a huge cost of living issue in and of itself, and cutting taxes will help people in the immediate term.
But politically, and I understand the economics, and I'm on your side, but I have to play devil's advocate because that's my job. In the old days, it's what Tories would say about Labour. Oh, you just want to do this without costing it, and you can't cut taxes unless you reduce spending. And that goes back to Margaret Thatcher, it goes back to George Osborne. She's rewriting the whole book here. Hell of a gamble.
Well, it was a second element as part of your intro was about economic growth. And there's more to it than just cutting taxes. I feel that cutting taxes would help boost economic growth, but it's not the entire picture. You've also got deregulation. You know, there's planning issues with building big infrastructure projects that will really put rocket boosters under growth. So it's about more than tax cuts, but tax cuts are certainly part of the picture when you're looking at investment and jobs and growth.
You're an expert in these matters, and we have talked before, and I roughly know where the Taxpayers Alliance is coming from for obvious reasons. But to what extent do you think this is really genuinely an assertion of fiscal policy to get us out of the mess that we're in now, as opposed to the assertion of a new Trussism as a way to run the economy, in the same way that Margaret Thatcher came up with her version of that in 1975 to 79 and eventually won that general election in 79 with it.
Yeah, I think part of the interesting thing in recent days has been Liz Truss talking about how we need to focus on growth more than we do on redistribution, and that we focus too much on redistribution. That's not to say that those on the lowest incomes or in vulnerable situations shouldn't get support. Of course they should, but focusing fiscal policy, focusing so intently on redistribution moves focus away from economic growth.
It's going to be a fantastic debate, and thank you for giving us your informed thoughts on that, John. Always good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. John O'Connell there from the Taxpayers Alliance. I'm sure you were hanging on his every word, as indeed was I, but we're also running pictures of the outside of the QE2. Can we go back to there just before I sign off? And the observant amongst you will have noticed James Cleverly going in. That is not James Cleverly at all. That is Bill Cash. But James Cleverly did go in earlier on. Bill Cash, one of the great standard bearers of the Brexit movement and a great potentate on the back benches. Former minister as well, but he's going in. But it was James Cleverly earlier on. And James, currently the Education Secretary, tipped to be the new Foreign Secretary if Liz Truss is the winner. It will happen there, in that building, in 34 minutes' time. We're live there with Darren McCaffrey, and we're also live in Downing Street with Tom Harwood. So do not go away. You won't miss a thing. Next up, Gloria and Mark with our continuing special coverage of the announcement of the next Prime Minister. But for me, from now, bye-bye. Sorry, it was a bit short.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. Today, many places will be dry and fine with sunny spells, but we are expecting a few showers, and later on those showers may well turn into thunderstorms. This area of low pressure, get used to it, because it's going to dominate our weather throughout this week, and it's going to throw spiralling bands of heavy showers across the UK as well. One is clearing away from northern Scotland, and another one is approaching the southwest. The wind's picking up here as well, and quite gusty once more in the far northeast. May see one or two showers across the southeast, one developing over the Midlands, but the main area across South Wales and Southwest England through the afternoon into the evening. Otherwise, as I said, most places dry and fine, quite warm actually for the time of year, 24, 25 degrees across the east. But these down